Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. I'm Ajahn Sona, and I'd like to just explain a little bit about how we select questions and why we do these Q&As. We try to select a variety of questions in the short time we have together on this live stream, as my intention is to answer as many questions as possible across the wide spectrum of Buddhist teachings. So if your question isn't selected today, please be sure to check out the link in the description below for my online Q&A directory. There you'll find dozens of topics and direct links to the answers I've given to similar questions over the past years on this YouTube channel. Without further ado, let's ask the first question, Pia.
Ajahn, our first question is from the live chat from Bodhipala in Slocum Valley, British Columbia, Canada. Respectful greetings, Ajahn. After old age, sickness, and death, the Buddha describes suffering as sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. Why do these not make a direct appearance as one of the hindrances?
Well, they do. So aversion is anything you don't like. So we have aversion to illness, aging, death, and loss. We have reactions to it. In other words, it's not something we want. However, there is a there is a type of thirst, which if one becomes a little rather disappointed in life, etc., then one might develop a thirst for the cessation of life. So that's called vibhava tanha, the thirst for non-existence. And then there's the thirst for existence. Bhava tanha, existence thirst. Vibhava tanha, existence for thirst for non-existence. And then there's kamma tanha, kamma as K-A-M-A, sensory thirst. So thirst for sights, sounds, smells, taste, touches, and thought processes, ideas, etc. So there are these thirsts, and if these thirsts are not satisfied, then we experience sadness, grief, lamentation. So lamentation is just an outward expression of this emotion of grief. So you also find this in the mindfulness teachings. There's a phrase that keeps repeating, just to the extent, the phrase is, just to the extent necessary for overcoming covetousness and grief for the world. And that grief is found in this first noble truth, the lamentation and sorrow. Covetousness, of course, is craving and desire. So there you have both desire and the opposite, aversion. So, when we summarize the basic problems of life, it's greed, hatred, and delusion. Simple. But when we say greed, it has a whole spectrum of things. We might not call greedy. That's a pretty strong term. But if you like peanut butter, etc., it's a form of greed. So, and hatred is a very strong term as well, but it really means the whole spectrum of aversion. Boredom is a form of aversion. Irritability is a form of aversion. I mean, hatred, of course, is a form of aversion, but even sadness is a form of aversion. You're sad because you don't like the situation. If you really like the situation, you would be sad. So the little list of problems of existence, illness, aging, death, and then grief, sorrow, lamentation, is the emotional quality and the physical, the things that happen to the body, the aging process of the body. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be accompanied by grief or sorrow or fear. These processes, as the enlightened person doesn't feel the emotional reaction to illness, aging, and death, they have an equanimous and non-attached attitude to the nature of the body. And so they get rid of the emotional things, but they don't get rid of illness, aging, and death. They have to go through those things. The body has to go through those things. Can the mind remain aloof from this process? If it can, then it will not, from a Buddhist point of view, then if you're really advanced in this, then rebirth will not recur, and you won't have to go through another round of lying in your cradle, in your diapers, being changed, and having to go to school and all that kind of stuff, and then getting old and getting sick and dying again. So that's the undesirable part of existence itself, is that the inevitable, having a body, however long it lasts, is subject to aging and death. And that's the reactions around it are accompany that. So that's brief explanation around that.
The next question is from Upasaka Asoka in Isla Butte, Scotland. Do you have any advice to people who may be going through a, quote, dark night in their Buddhist practice? What is going on with the mind during a dark night? Is it part of spiritual growth? Is it a side effect of Buddhist insight? What can be done to bring relief, especially when it is hard to practice right effort, generate joy, or feel much interest in anything worldly or unworldly?
Yeah, you don't think your way out of that. You don't think your way out of that. You have to trust in pure non-thinking. And one of the best cures for this is just go to a quiet room by yourself and just do breath meditation. And don't believe your thoughts. Your thoughts are tainted. They're emerging from the mood itself. So the mood subtly creeps up, and that's the creeping up of the mood is just habit structures in the mind. And there's apparently, you don't recall having thought any negative thoughts, but suddenly you start to feel anxious and a little bit hopeless and things like this. And then the mood pervades your body. So it's a little stain that sweeps through the entire body-mind. And then after that, it colors your thoughts. And so you start to have thoughts of fear and thoughts of negative thoughts, how hopeless the situation is and all this. So you can't think your way out because every thought is stained with this feeling. But the way out is not through talk or anything like that. Sometimes, of course, somebody shows up and cheers you up, or it pulls you into another mood, and that sometimes works. But basically, the best solution is to stop thinking about it, stop thinking altogether, and feel the subsiding as the anxiety just starts to fall down. The sick feeling in the stomach and so forth starts to decline, and it might take an hour or 2 hours. Notice at least that if there's a reduction in the tone, the negative tone, if it comes down just a bit, you're on the right track. Maybe you don't get rid of it completely. You think, it didn't work. I sat there for an hour and it only dropped a little bit. Well, that means that you're going in the right direction. And it means that you don't think your way out of this, because your thoughts are sabotaging the whole process. You still your way out of this. It's kind of like you're hiding from the enemy, and it's not about being active or running. There's a time to play dead. Don't move. You'll see that some of the animals, and you're in Scotland, so you know that sheep sometimes play dead. They turn on their side and put their legs up, and they play absolute dead. So this is the time to stop thinking, be still, be away from people, be away from everything, all the news, all of the world, all of the stress and strain, and just try to let that feeling sink down and depart. And that's how you you can come out the other side. And you might have to do this several times, many times. And in fact, when you start to feel it creeping up, you got to stop what you're doing and go and quietly into your room and let it sink down. Now, if you're having demands in an office and all this kind of stuff, it's tricky. See, these people fall into depressions and they have to keep their livelihoods going and all this stuff. It's too bad they can't just withdraw and go quietly into a separate room and just breathe and let it go, because it's not an intellectual matter. It's not an intellectual matter. So you can't treat it intellectually. You treat it by the settling of the mind, the reduction of those little neurons that are firing. So that's the hint, in a way. That's the direction you need to go.
Our next question is from the live chat from Stephen. Dear Ajahn, when right effort is exerted, what is doing the exerting? Not a self, I assume. Is it the Dhamma or citta? From the Buddhist point of view, are there no subjects, only verbs and predicates?
Yeah, the idea of somebody doing something is an unnecessary. You're adding a secondary dimension. It's not necessary. Like in modern, let's say from a modern scientific viewpoint, we don't require God to run the universe. The universe just runs. We don't ask, who's running the universe? Who's making the planet spin? The planet just spins. And so intentions arise. They don't need somebody to make them arise. Intentions arise because that's part of the vortex of mental processes. There are intentions, but nobody behind the intentions. You don't need a person. Like, what do you conceive of? How do you conceive of this person who has the intentions? Is it your hair or your nose? Or is it your brain? Is it your brain that has intentions? What? But is that who you are? Is it your brain that is you? And then it has intentions? Why do you need to have two things? Why not just intentions? There are intentions, and they are verbs, yes. So language has nouns and verbs, but that doesn't mean that reality has nouns and verbs. And so when we look into even physics of the world, we see, as we look deeper and deeper, we find smaller and smaller objects, mostly space and empty little wiggly things, quantum packets. And closer inspection, they all kind of dissolve into wavicles, and then it's just a quantum energy field or a syrup of energy. And so that's what it is, and we package it for convenience into things like pass the salt. It's just easy to get the salt by not referring it as a verb. It's just a noun. But it doesn't mean that salt is a thing. It means that salt is actually a process. And so are you. So yes, everything is a process. From a Buddhist point of view, he's analyzed it to that all is flux. All is flux.
Ajahn, our next question is from the live chat from John in Toronto. Can a stream enterer or once returner experience severe grief in their future lives? Is it necessary that the future lives proceeding from these stages be difficult in order to progress further down the path?
Well, the first stage and second stage of enlightenment, sotapanna or stream entry is the first stage, and 3 fetters have fallen away. One has confidence in the teachings of the Buddha. One has given up superstitious attachments to rites and rituals, and is now convinced that it's through personal effort and wisdom that one liberates oneself. And you have glimpsed the false idea of a self, of a self which is substantial and travels through time. You have given up that perception. So you have a different view. You're now in accordance with the sort of the viewpoint of the Buddha. So that's called stream entry. And at that stage, your emotional reaction to the world has been circumscribed. It's not gone. So you can still have anger and greed, grief, even a little depression sort of thing. But in the second stage, anger and greed are further reduced so that they don't actually rise spontaneously at all. You're walking around as a very healthy emotional state, and it takes direct provocation to cause any kind of hostility or anger or greed or anything to arise. And then it rises in a very mild form. It doesn't last long. So those are the two first stages. And in the next, so the first one, they say that Sotapanna could experience up to 7 more lifetimes, but it's inevitable that one is leaving samsara, and up to 7 more lifetimes, none of them below the level of human, and you'd be a virtuous human. And you're born this way. It's in your character at birth. As far as the second stage, it's called a once returner, so there's no possibility. You're going to solve the big puzzle of samsara with no more than 1 lifetime ahead of you. And you're going to be naturally inclined to a very spiritual life, very aloof from the normal preoccupations of people. Now, you don't need difficulties in order to push your way through this. You could have a very, very nice life and attain enlightenment. Some people attain it very quickly and easily, and they don't have any burdens or resistance at all in their present life. It's to do with development over many lives, perhaps, but so just like talents and skills, so some people they seem to be able to pick up music or art or another language or something very easily, and they don't have to struggle with it. Other people struggle. They work very hard with these things, and they overcome the difficulties. And they sometimes say, well, I'm glad I had all these challenges and difficulties. It made me a better person or something like this. But the person beside them hasn't had to struggle with it, and they're very accomplished as well. So it's not by resistance or terrible circumstances that you're forced to develop more enlightenment. More or less, it's the vision that you have. So you can envision, this saying I guess the Christian saying, there but for the grace of God go I. So somebody was watching a prisoner being led off to execution and thinking, well, that could have been me. I'm lucky. So that's the imagination, like in your imagination and understanding of life, you could be anybody. And all of the terrible things that happen to people, it could have been you. So there was a great earthquake in Turkey and Syria, 50,000 people trapped under rubble. You could have been visiting, it could have been you. You could have been in the tsunami in 2004 or whatever it was, or the one in Japan, or a hurricane and car accidents. And if you have an imagination, you can imagine all these things are possible. And do I want to? It's a very vulnerable and precarious position to be born into this world. It's a dangerous, hostile, problematic situation, and death is inevitable. You're born into a certain death. So all you have to do is reflect on this. You don't have to actually have the experiences of near-death experiences or anything like this in order to know that your entire life is a near-death experience. As I do have a book, by the way, which the title is Life is a Near-Death Experience, and you can go on Amazon and find it, So I will leave that for now. Next question.
Next question is from Isabella in Herefordshire, United Kingdom. I'd like to ask Venerable Ajahn Sona for insights on the cultivation of the parami of wisdom and the virtue of compassion in an ever-evolving, fast-paced technological world.
Well, wisdom and compassion, sometimes in some schools of Buddhism, that's like the two wings of the bird. You need both wisdom and compassion. So compassion is sensitivity to the sufferings of others. And by the way, it's not suffering with the suffering of others or grief at the suffering of others. It's good, friendliness and loving kindness towards those who are suffering. A recognition of what it feels like for them. It's not you suffering; it's them suffering, and you may do something about it. You may say something. You think, well, I know what that would feel like, and may they be well, may they be safe, and may be protected from that. You wish them well. Wisdom is the ability to know the important questions to be solved. And they say that this parami, this development of perfection of character that makes wisdom is to apply your intellect to questions. So, but not just any question. So in this day and age, of course, science, technology is kind of king. And we admire the smart scientists and the technologists who invent things. And they have to ask themselves questions about molecules and atoms and how to build a bridge and things like this. But those are not wisdom questions. So part of the big IQ test, like you can take a little IQ test and you just sit down there and answer, why are these, what's similar between these three shapes, or vocabulary tests and so forth. Those are not wisdom tests. Wisdom test is, what is the primary question that I need to answer in this life? What are the important questions that need answering for me to have a better quality of life? And that's the wisdom tradition of philosophy. That's original philosophy. That's the kind of questions that maybe Socrates and Plato were asking. And of course, the Buddha's first question is, what we're in a situation of inevitable illness, aging, and death. Is there any way to face this with a better way of being in the face of this? How to make the best life? And that's how you develop the wisdom. So you keep asking questions about Dhamma, the essentials of life. Ask about, how can I overcome my suffering? How can I help others? How can I have a better quality of life? There are secondary questions like, should I ignore the skills of life? And the wisdom answer would be, no, you need skills as well, but they're not the answer to life. So money is not the answer to life. Fame is not the answer to life. Money is not the answer to life. Skills are not even the answer to life. There's a meta answer, a larger answer, but the other ones can help you and serve that purpose. But the big answer is to have a wise attitude. So this is original philosophy and some religions as well. This is the primary drive of certain religions. And it is the essential drive of Buddhism as well, is to answer the big question of how to relieve suffering. Yes.
Next question is from the live chat from No One Everyone in Iran. Dear Ajahn, there is a commentary about a monk named Tusita who liked his robes so much that when he dies, he is reborn as a louse on his robes. If a renunciant in search of wisdom can fall so deep, so easily, then where's the hope for the average householder? and there's so many attachments to their life and families and belongings, despite how good and moral they try to be.
Right. I mean, there are foolish monks around. People over the multi-centuries, Buddhism has been around 2,500 years at least, and in that time, millions of people have become monks and nuns, and a few of them have been idiots. Tusita among them. So I don't know, fascinated with a bed sheet, you know. That's what the monk's robe is, just like take a bed sheet, cut it up, dye it brown, wrap it around yourself. I mean, the whole point of the exercise is that it's pretty hard to get attached to this robe. And so if he did, then that shows a very, very materialistic attitude. And the poor fellow was reborn as a louse. Of course, it's a story. It's a very good story, and it's really a story for monks, I think. You know, there's a lot of funny stories around monasteries. In Asia, there's a lot of dogs that hang around monasteries. One reason is you can get food there, and nobody beats you up. So So one of the things they say is, oh, those are monks that broke the precepts. They end up back in the monastery as dogs, hanging around. So it's a little fable for monks, like, you know, this is a high demand profession. If you go into the robes, it's a high demand profession. Don't get sloppy. Be careful. You end up hanging around reborn as a dog, hanging around a monastery. So these are stories for edification, etc., not necessarily to be taken literally, but that's the point of the exercise. Now, for lay people, yes, you may be surrounded by clothes and cars and everything, but lots of people are wise enough to not get preoccupied by these things. They live simple lives in the middle of all of this stuff. They make a livelihood. They have to. They take care of their family, but you don't have to be swallowed alive by these things, you know, obsessed by Ferraris and mink coats and things like that. Yeah.
Next question is from the live chat from Sumana in Whitecourt, Alberta, Canada. There is a common instruction to, quote, turn towards suffering rather than using distraction or denial. How does this reconcile with instructions for removing distracting thoughts? Help, please.
Yeah, that's kind of like the heroic attitude, you know, turn towards the suffering and all this kind of stuff. It's a lot of the people who are not on the level of the Buddha. They have all kinds of ideas about how to face, you know, what you're supposed to do and put your face into the suffering and all this, you know. So it's what you need to do is reflect on the nature of suffering, that if you want to be healthy and youthful and alive, then you're going to be disappointed because it ain't going to happen. You must age, sicken, and die. So when you contemplate that, but it's not to be contemplated in fear or horror or anything like that, or face the horror. It is to simply know the facts of life. So with an equanimous mind, with an intelligent mind, you realize, okay, let's remember this is a very temporary exercise. We will be moving on out of this life and everybody around us. So this is the reflection on the 5 subjects: illness, aging, death, loss, and responsibility. So to be very careful that whatever you think, say, or do, you don't regret, that you do good things, virtuous things, you behave in a virtuous way so you don't have pangs of conscience. So that's to remember, but not in not having your face pushed into some sort of deliberate. It's not like a denial of suffering, that Buddhism is actually usually thought of as a pessimistic religion for talking about suffering all the time. But it's not. It's just a realistic religion. And of course, then you find out that places that are Buddhist, like Thailand and so forth, tend to be called the land of smiles. So everybody's walking around with a smile on their face. Monks in general tend to be quite lighthearted. And it's because you face these things, you're not sucked into suffering about it. You're trying to get over the suffering about it, past the suffering. So you see some religions where suffering is kind of celebrated, like, imitation of Christ and so forth, the suffering, endless. Whereas we're talking about overcoming the suffering, getting past the suffering. So yeah, it's not the greatest of advice to be just committing people to the inevitable suffering that they must experience if they want to be transfigured into heaven or something like this. Now, yet heaven is not achieved by suffering. That's not the way. Yeah. Okay, next.
Next question from the live chat is from Norma in Florida, United States. Question, who's breathing in my body? Sometimes when meditating or swimming, I feel confused and can't breathe normally. This non-self is tough to grasp. Other times it's quite easy to just accept it.
Well, that's self-consciousness of breath. You become aware that you're breathing. And when you become aware, when you start trying to breathe, which is autonomic, so when you're asleep, you breathe. And you're not conscious even. You're unconscious and breathing. So you don't need to be aware of your breath, but when you bring consciousness into an autonomic process, which is breathing, like you can become aware of your heart beating, but you don't have to beat your heart. Your breath just happens by itself. And that's one of the things that happens when people try to do breath meditation. They find that the consciousness interferes with the unconscious process of breathing, and you feel like you can't get a full breath, or weird things happen. As you do it more, eventually you become comfortable watching the fact that you breathe. And part of the exercise of watching your breath is also to learn to watch the universe, because we're trying to control the universe when the weather is bad and we're tense and angry at it. Why does it have to be raining today? I wanted to go play tennis. That's a weird thing to do, isn't it? Like, people do this with sports. You see, if they're watching a football game on television and their legs are twitching as if they are playing, they're cheering for their team. Well, they're shouting at a television screen. That there is no way to influence that game, shouting at the television screen. You're engaged in a bizarre way with attempting to run the universe. And you can learn to stop running the universe, because it's a very thankless task to run the universe. But I recommend that you all give up running the universe. And also give up trying to breathe yourself. Now, if you can manage to just watch the fact that you breathe, you might have a chance of giving up the thankless task of running the universe. And that's a great relief. I want to tell you a little story. It's the last of the 11 tasks of Hercules. Sometimes they're said to be 10 tasks of Hercules, but it's actually one of them he got help, so he had to do it again. So anyway, the last task of Hercules is he has to do the very difficult thing. He has to get the golden apples, which are only grown in this orchard at the end of the world. And he, even though he's ultimately the strongest human, sort of half divine and half human, interesting character, he can't go there. He's slaying dragons, he's done all kinds of amazing things, but he can't get to this orchard at the end of the world. But it turns out that the guy who holds up the earth, whose name is Atlas, he's another Greek god, his daughters actually run that orchard. So he goes down to North Africa where Atlas is holding up the world. It's a very difficult job to hold up the world. You got to be really strong. You got to hold it on your shoulders. Anyway, because he's really strong, he says, look, I'll hold the world up while you go visit your daughters, if you can bring back the golden apple from their orchard. And Atlas really thinks, wow, this is a great deal. I'd love to see my daughters, and this is a terrible burden to hold up the world. If this guy will do it, and he's probably the only other guy that can do it. So he hands the world over, and Hercules is straining, struggling to hold up the world. Atlas goes off, visits his daughter, and he comes back with this apple, this golden apple. And Hercules, of course, is, I'm so glad to see you. And Atlas he's pretty happy not holding up the world anymore, and he doesn't want to give back the apple. He doesn't want to give the apple to him. He says, like, I don't think I want the world back. Anyway, Hercules has to use some cleverness. He can't just be strong, he's got to be smart too. So he just says, let me look at that apple. Just let me hold it for a second, just take the earth here for a second. And he gets the apple, hands the earth over to Atlas, and then walks away with the apple, throwing the apple up in the air. And that's the last of his tasks, the 10 tremendously difficult tasks that a hero has to perform. And the last of these is to give up. His final solution is to give up holding the world. So this is the meaning of that story, is that you have got to walk away holding the golden apple and realize you were never holding up the world. Nobody holds up the world. Nobody needs to hold up the world. Nobody needs to run the universe. It goes by itself. So you might discover this while you're watching your breath. So that's a long, convoluted story. Back to the questions.
Our next question is from the live chat from Sean in California, United States. Can you elaborate on the difference between paticca-samuppada and the Western view of causality?
Paticca-samuppada. Paticca-samuppada is cause and effect in the moral and psychological, physiological domain. And it is more or less of greatest use, just that the Buddha analyzes the workings of the mind as a causal structure, that it's not random. So lots of people, they don't know why, like thoughts arise and emotions arise, and it's all chaos, and there's no order to it, and it has no system to it. So, psychology, the so-called science of psychology, is it a science? Like if you ask physicists whether psychology is a science, they say, well, not really. I mean, it's a quasi-science, but not a hard science like physics, where you can measure things and do, 100, you can repeat the experiment 1,000 times and get exactly the same results because you understand the causality in the physical world. Is there really causality in the psychological dimension? Now, of course, the psychologists are thinking, come on, we're a science. They'd like to be a science. And then there's sociology, which is even like large groups of psychology. The hardcore physicists say, you're not a science, come on. But you need credibility these days. You need psychologists. They got a PhD, and they're supposed to be scientific and everything. So, okay. I appreciate their attempts to quantize it and determine the so-called the laws of psychology. Well, the Buddha is way ahead of them. So when a person has problems, they go to a psychologist, and they have their little theories of how the mind works, and they give the person, so Freud or somebody, let's analyze your dreams. That'll tell us paticca-samuppada, or dependent origination. So he says, yes, the mind is lawful, it works in a certain way, and if you put in certain causes, then results will appear. If you remove certain causes, then the results will also disappear. And so it is a causal analysis of how the mind works and how the mind affects the body as well, but it's also an analysis of moral causality. By the way, like pure science, physics and so forth says to us that the universe works in a very precise causal way, except perhaps at the quantum level, where it's kind of uncertain. But they don't, physics doesn't at all say that there's any moral causality in the universe, or any meaning. So moral causality and meaning are deeply interconnected. So most religions they say there's results from your moral actions. Science says there's no evidence that there's any causal results from your either good or bad actions. When you look around the world, by the way, and you look at history, when you read the great books on history, what you see is absolutely a Holocaust is appearing every 5 years. One tribe is wiping out another. One culture, one empire is assassinating, torturing, etc. And the guys that are in charge of this live to be 80 years old and die in their sleep. Apparently no moral cause and effect if you just look at this life. But Buddhism looks beyond this life, before it and after it, in order to see a larger causal pattern. And so that is part of dependent origination as well. So it's the missing link. So in the West, we have, in scientific circles, we have kind of the law of physics, the laws of biology, and the laws of psychology, and there it ends. Buddhism has those same laws. Utu niyama is physics, citta niyama is psychology, biology is bija niyama. So they have those 3 laws, and those 3 laws are recognized and so forth. And then there's another law, KAMMA niyama, the cause and effect in the moral dimensions. And then there's a 5th law, Dhamma niyama, which is how those 4 laws all interact. So those are like 4 aspects, like the police department, the fire department, and the hospital. And then there's the administration, which overviews and interacts with all of those. So the mayor works with all of those. So those laws, physics and biology and psychology, interact with the law of kamma or karma, cause and effect in the moral dimension. And that's the very sophisticated structure that the Buddha talks about. So without writing the Encyclopedia of Buddhism, I think I'll go on to the next question.
Next question is from the live chat from year 0. Dear Ajahn, is suffering underrated? It motivates us, encourages betterment, and in some ways it can even be enjoyable. Why hide from suffering?
Suffering can, the Buddha does say suffering can be the cause for the arising of faith. So one looks for relief from suffering. So notice that people don't enjoy suffering. They don't like suffering. They look for relief from suffering. There's a phenomena where people cut themselves or burn themselves, or why? Do they like pain? No. Apparently, it's to relieve pain. So they have internal pain. They have tremendous anxiety and so forth. And the only way they get some relief from it is by inflicting physical pain on themselves. So it's a matter of people's devising strategies. So you look at the worst areas of the big cities in North America, they're just covered with people who are addicted to heroin and all kinds of, fentanyl and stuff. They're lying all over the street. Why are they doing that? Do they like that? No, that drug is a painkiller. It reduces their pain, and sometimes it actually makes them feel good. Why does heroin make some people feel good and other people doesn't make them feel good? Because it's a painkiller. So the person who it makes feel good is in some state of negative pain, and this painkiller is very addictive for them because it relieves their pain. So even if they have to go without food or be arrested or maybe even come close to overdosing and so forth, they still persist in this because it's less suffering, not more suffering. The person who's not suffering inside is not prone to addiction to these things. By the way, look at alcohol, for instance. A certain percentage of the population, maybe 5%, has a tendency to addiction to this, and 95 don't. They drink occasionally for social purpose. They don't get addicted. Why? It's your relationship, the degree of suffering, and the degree that relieves your suffering. So this idea that, suffering is fun, or it's just the wrong use of the word. You have the wrong definition of this word suffering. Suffering is not desirable. It is not noble. It is something to be overcome and be freed from. And that is the realization and the wisdom that one overcomes it. And you will see a whole little, even religious aspects that kind of exalt deliberate suffering, putting yourself in a situation of suffering as if that will somehow be beneficial to you. No. It is not the teachings of the Buddha, not the awareness of the Buddha, not the way of the Buddha. Yeah.
Next question from the live chat is from Demir in Croatia. Advice for a 40-year-old who tried 20 different jobs in 20 years. Most categorize me as lazy, but I find it hard to do something that, quote, isn't me. Problem is, I don't know what that would be.
Well, 40, and there's a folk sort of tradition that 40 is your decade of wisdom. And so you might be just on the verge of saying, maybe I'm not going to find the stuff that I just like. Maybe I just have to have a livelihood, and I just have to do it. And I have to, I'm not looking for happiness through my livelihood. I'm looking for putting bread on the table, paying the rent. And what I need to do, though, is not make it any harder than it has to be. So if I have to sweep up a room or something, I just sweep up the room, and I don't in this room. So we find ourselves in such situations. So even a monk has to sweep the monastery. We have to do menial labor. We have to wash our plates and so forth. And you don't have to suffer. It doesn't have to be the thing you always wanted to do. There's a lot of things in life that are not, they're just dull. But they're okay. It's just, it's like you have to eat every day. It's just repetition, and you need to do it, and you need to not create suffering around that. So be present to the activity. Don't be dreaming of doing something else while you're having to do the job. So don't be thinking, I want to be somewhere else. I want to be somewhere else. Don't want to be somewhere else. Be there, do the job, accept reality, and that's the way most people have to live, that way. And you can reduce your suffering or you can increase it. You will increase it by wanting it to be some other way, or you can reduce it by accepting the normal reality of the tasks that humans have to do in this world, this today, and accepting that and doing it. Yeah.
Next question from the live chat is from Eugene. Hello, Ajahn. I wanted to ask what the Buddha meant by kamma that was neither dark nor bright, and that we should seek that one. Why not seek good kamma instead?
Well, it has to be in context. So bright and dark kamma, in that case, is seeking perhaps transient, pleasurable things. Our ultimate aim is to overcome this. There are three thirsts. There's the thirst for sensory experience, kama tanha, thirst for non-existence, vibhava tanha, and the thirst for continued existence, bhava tanha. In like psychiatry or psychology, since Freud, the death wish, Freud comes up with the death wish, and then there's, of course, the life wish, the desire to stay alive, and then there's, of course, very commonly the desire to see and hear and smell and taste and touch things and to think about things. But all of these they don't have ultimate resolution. So we have to transcend all of these drives to bring us to this final kind of what is called enlightenment. And so you have to be detached, from these thirsts. And so that is probably what is meant in that context by dark, of course, is negative stuff. Bright is like positive stuff. But the neutral stuff, neither, is detached stuff. By the way, that detached stuff feels good. Because the characteristics, the 7 factors of the enlightened mind include joy and deep serenity and equanimity. And equanimity, by the way, the balanced, is not simply neutral. It's a very refined kind of pleasure. It's just ultra refined. So the enlightened person is not just a log of wood or something that unfeeling. It is actually in a state of peak mental and emotional health is what they're in. Yeah.
Ajahn, our next question from the live chat is from Chloe in Portland, Oregon, United States. Dear Ajahn, why does the Buddha still practice jhana after his enlightenment?
Good question. And that is one of the reasons for saying, that in some schools of Buddhism and some attitudes toward it, that the 8th factor of the path, which is jhana, samma samadhi, is kind of set aside or thought to be some sort of yogic thing or not essential to Buddhism. But then the Buddha himself, even after his enlightenment, is practicing jhana. One time, he said he had a bad back in his later life. He had a sore back. And he would say he said to Ananda, the only time I'm not in pain from my back is when I'm in jhana. So jhana is relief from bodily pain. Jhana purifies the mind for clarifying concepts, helping thinking clearly. After emerging from jhana, one can think very clearly, and also for him, sort of a supernormal psychic activities. So you see these types of, knowing the minds of others, and looking into the past, looking into the future. These are aided by the practice of samadhi, jhana. Yeah.
Ajahn, our final question today is from Martin in Belgium. Dear Ajahn, how important is SILA, particularly the 5th precept, in order to experience the jhanas? Could you please give me some advice to help me to not break this precept?
Yeah, it's so the fifth precept is alcohol and drugs that cause a weakening of mindfulness, a weak negligence that inclines you to not be lucid and clear. So jhana is requires tremendous clarity, and it's kind of like if you were going to have brain surgery, and the physician says, "Do you mind if I drink while you do this operation on your brain?" Say, "I'd rather you wouldn't." "Do you mind if I smoke dope while I do, operate on your brain?" "I wish you wouldn't." So you're the neurosurgeon and the patient. So you are operating on your brain. When you do samadhi, you are operating on your own brain. You're changing the structure and configuration of your mind. And in some ways, I suppose, when we have enough sophistication, we will see brain changes. And I suppose they can. So there are these functional MRI machines that look at activity and growth and changes in the brain of meditators and so forth. So when you're trying to do these things, you're changing actually structures of the brain itself by activities of the mind. And you don't want to, the demand is so high, the clarity needs are so great that you can't afford to imbibe any alcohol or drugs. It interferes with that process. It weakens your capacities and inclines you to muddiness. So appamado, mud, mud. Your mind becomes muddy. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to conclude today, and I hope you remember that we have a Q&A directory in the description below, and you can go back and see all beautifully set out, all the questions that have been asked, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them now. And so some of your questions that perhaps you wanted answered and weren't answered, they may have been answered in the past, and now you can go back and look in our directory and get the answers to those questions. So that's it for today.